is the Familiar Feline ASMR. Today we are going to be learning how to make a simple stuffed animal from a drawing. This is a drawing that my son did today. I asked him to design a new stuffed animal. He says it is a box with horns. So it has these crazy eyes and this squiggly mouth, and up here are the horns. This is just drawn on regular computer paper with a permanent marker, nothing too fancy. And the items that we will need to turn this into a stuffy are some push pins, which if you do this with children you have to be careful as these are very sharp. And you will also need some yarn. This is the yarn that my son chose. So we will be doing some sewing and some really light embroidery with this. You will also need a blunt tip yarn needle. So these needles have a larger eye here for yarn, and the tip is not sharp. That is a good thing about this project, that children can also help sew it. Because they won't get hurt by the needle. And you will also need 2 pieces of felt. I think that these are 12 by 12 maybe. And my son picked orange and green. And you will also need scissors to cut paper with. And a pair of fabric scissors. You don't want to cut paper with the same scissors that you cut fabric with, because paper really dulls scissors, and you want very sharp scissors to cut fabric with. I am the only person in my house that is allowed to use these scissors. Most people that sew would agree with me there. Nobody's allowed to touch the fabric scissors. And you also will need some of this, which is a polyfill fiber stuffing. You can also use bits of yarn, scraps of fabric, anything soft to stuff your stuffed animal with. So the first step in actually making this is to cut out the pattern. So we'll use our non-fabric scissors. So now we have our little pattern, and I will get out the 2 pieces of felt that we need to cut. So now we have the piece of orange and the piece of green he wanted. So we're going to take a piece and put the pattern right over top of it. And if you do try this, just watch and make sure you and whoever is helping you doesn't get poked by your needles. So you want to put it in and then have it come out like this, so it holds the pattern in place. You don't want the needle to go outside the pattern, so just run him along the sides. That way you can still cut along the edge without removing any of the pins. And you don't really need that many, just enough to hold the paper in place. There, so now we have the pattern pinned to the fleece. We're gonna take our fabric scissors and cut it out. And you also want to give a little bit of allowance for the seams. So with something like this, I usually add about 1/4 of an inch around the outside. So just kind of find that mark and try to keep it even as you cut. The sides don't have to be perfect. They can be a little jagged. It won't really make a difference to the final product. Especially since when I typically make things like this with my son, he does the cutting. So when you're done with this cut, you should have something that looks like this. And then we'll take all the pins out and stick them back in our tomato. So now we have the first piece. And now we do the same thing to the next piece of fabric. We just stick our pins in. Way around. Just enough to hold the paper down. And Now we will cut the green with the same little bit of seam allowance. And now we take the pins out. So now we have two pieces that when we put them together, they should line up pretty evenly. Here we go. So now we have our front and our back, and my son wanted the green side to be the face. So we're going to take it, and I think we'll do it this way so it's the same. And I'm just going to take a pen and kind of lightly draw on there what he wanted. Actually, let me move that mouth up a little bit. There we go, because you don't want it to be too close to the edge when you sew. And then we'll give him the eyes that he wanted. Okay, so this is what we have right now. And I might move that mouth up just a little more. I think it's gonna be a little close to the bottom. It might be okay. We'll just leave it for now. So now we are going to do a little bit of embroidery, which is really simple. It is not very difficult at all. So we'll take a length of yarn, and we'll take our yarn and our blunt tip needle and thread it. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll just go into the back right at the edge of the mouth and pull it through. And then go just about an inch over, and pull it through. So we have our first stitch here. And then we'll take it through the back here and we'll just tie a little knot to keep the mouth in place. Now when you tie this knot, you don't want to pull it tight. You want to kind of leave it loose. And then just double it over. And again, don't pull it tight. Just tight enough with itself that it won't come loose, because you don't want to pull the front together. So now we'll go about another inch up, go through, oops, and pull it, and then we'll go back through the hole we went through before. And now we have our second stitch, and we'll just keep doing that, going forward about an inch, and then going back through the hole we went through before. Oops. All the way down the mouth. And back through the hole. And there we go. And if you get it a little too tight, or the fabric starts to do this and kind of pucker, all you have to do is just kind of give it a gentle tug, and it will typically loosen up the yarn and give you a little more allowance. And we'll just keep doing that. Oops. My thread came off of my needle. Okay. And forward another inch. There we go. And I do apologize if you hear any kind of voices in the distant background. I think my neighbors are outside talking. It's hard to tell what gets picked up by the mic and what doesn't. So let's see. We should need one more stitch after this one. And so we'll go back through. There we go. And now we have our mouth. So now we are going to knot this down here. So just to knot it on the end, you go through a stitch on the back, and then you have your loop, and you just pass it through and pull it tight. Again, not so tight that it puckers the fabric. There we go. And we'll snip it. You also want to make sure you don't cut it down by the knot. All of this will end up inside the stuffy anyway, with the stuffing and everything, so it doesn't matter if you have tails. But if you cut it too close to the knot, then it can really easily come undone. So now we're going to do the eyes. So it's just the same thing. We pick a point in the eye, and you go through the back. Stop when you have a short enough length, and then just go over a little bit. These stitches are going to be a little bit smaller because we don't want the eye to look too boxy. Smaller stitches will make it easier for it to look a little more round. And then, just like last time, we go over and we make our loop and we pull through. And you don't want to pull too tight, just nice and loose so it can't come undone. And give it another little knot for safety. And we'll try to make these eyes. It's hard to make things look round when you're using bulky yarn. I even find it difficult with really thin thread and hand embroidery, so there'll be some sharp corners on these eyes. That's okay. So we're just going to finish this eye, and then we'll do a little pupil. There we go. This yarn that I'm using, I actually used to make, oops, I got a little knot back here, make my husband a sweater a while ago. I just had some of this extra in my drawer. And my son liked the color. And then just go back through our first hole and go back through the last. Just come on. It doesn't want to go through. There we go. Now we have the round of the eye, and now we'll do the pupil, which will just kind of go in at the bottom, and then just go in right at the top. So it just kind of leaves a very small dot of yarn on the eye. And now we can just take this yarn without knotting it and go over and do the next eye. It's the same thing, you just want to do it just enough to give it the round shape, if that is the shape you are going for. And in. And round. And then we'll just go in that first one and go back through the second one. And now we have our circle. We'll just go into the bottom part of the pupil and come out the top. And now we have this guy. I like the way my son designed the face. I think he's gonna be pretty cute when he's done. So now we'll just tie our knots. Just a little knot in the back, like I showed you before. And then we'll cut away from the knot. Now we're going to sew this together, the two pieces, but we're going to sew it together inside out. So you want this part, the back, to be on the outside. So here's the face. I'm going to take the orange fabric and put it right over top, because now when we're done sewing around, we'll reach in and we will turn it right side out, and that will hide the stitches and make it a little bit stronger around the edges, because the stitches will be a little more inside the fabric. So we still have some of the yarn on our needle, and you'll want to start on the bottom someplace, because we're going to leave a little hole where we can pull it right side out, and then we'll stuff it, and then we'll hand sew. So you want the part that's going to be sewn again once it's all done to be a little more hidden. So to start this, you're going to want to spread these pieces apart and go through just one side of the fabric, and then take your yarn and go through it again like this. Okay. And then you're going to put this right here. So you make a little knot, and you can also tie it again to make it extra secure. And remember to leave the tail. All this is going to be going on the inside of the stuffed animal anyway. So then you'll go back through both pieces. And this part can be a little hard with a blunt needle. It depends on what kind of fleece you have. Sometimes I find it goes through quite easy through two pieces, but not this time. You can always separate and go through one at a time, which is easy. Well, easier. And just go through one. This really doesn't want to go through this orange. It went through the green so well, but this orange is a little bit tougher. I might switch to a sharp needle. Maybe not. Let's see. So we'll go through the orange and then the green. It goes so much easier through the green. And with this, I'm just doing a whip stitch. So you just go through this orange is really tough. It just goes right through the green, but it won't go through the orange. So you just go through and it makes this loop, and you just pull the loop. Another kind of stitch you can do on these is the ladder stitch. So it's just like whip stitching, and you make this loop, but instead of just pulling the loop tight, you take your yarn and you pass it through the loop and pull it. And then that's how you do that type of stitch. There are a lot of different kinds of stitches. I do not know very many. I typically just do whatever feels right when I'm making something, or if I'm feeling really lazy, I just whip stitch everything because that's the easiest stitch. But you want to make sure that these are close enough together, these stitches, that you're not going to have holes in your work. So to test that, you can take your finger and kind of shove it in there. See, you can't see my finger here, but you can see it here. So these two stitches are too far apart, and it's really easy. You can just go back and just stitch right in between there. And as long as you're not pulling it too tight, the fabric won't pucker or anything like that. See how it's doing that? You just flatten it out, and that should be enough. It looks like we're going to want about a 1/4 inch between every stitch to keep it from losing stuffing out the sides. So we don't want to pull that one tight. We want to lay that one flat. Get our yarn out. And even if your stitching is messy and doesn't look very pretty, it won't matter when you're done with a project like this, because it will all be hidden on the inside of the stuffed animal. So one thing I forgot to mention, if you have a tougher felt like this, I actually think I might have called this fleece a time or two, but it's not, it's felt. You can take a hole puncher and actually, if you have a very good one, punch holes in the edges of the fabric, so that way if kids want to do the stitching, they can. Right now I wish that I had holes punched in this. This orange is really tough. I have to really work my needle through. But if I do it on the green, it just goes right through. That orange is tough stuff. So we're getting pretty short here. I don't really want to end this at the tip of the ear, but I think I'm going to have to. So to end this and start a new piece, you just go back and loop it through like this, and then you can loop it again and stop like this, so you have a little loop to pass it through and make a little knot. that. And you can also see now how far apart my stitches are to help keep the stuffing in. And if I go along here with my hands, you can't poke a finger or anything through, so that should keep most of the stuffing, if not all of it, in. My son can be pretty harsh with his stuffed animals, so I'm always fixing them anyway. So up here is the same thing. We're going to want to go in one side. And come through. And because we have our tail right here, I'm just going to go ahead and tie a little knot, because I don't want to make up here too bulky, because it's right on the tip of this ear. So now we're going to go back down the ear. We'll just start. We're going to go back in this orange side here. If I can get it. You can use a sharp needle for this, but it's hard to get it into the eye. You can also use thread or even a sewing machine for this. I've sewn lots of fleece and felt with a sewing machine, and either of those fabrics or almost any fabric can work really well for this project. It's just slightly more kid-friendly to use the felt, because if you have the thinner felt, the kids can easily sew right through it, and they don't require much extra help. Seem to have a problem here. Okay, I got it. And we'll just keep sewing all the way around. It's really hard up here on the ears. I keep accidentally looping my yarn around, or his horns, or whatever my son thinks they're going to be. I think he said horns, I'm pretty sure. But I guess that doesn't mean they can't also be ears. We'll start on the second horn. Lost my yarn again. Okay, come on. now I am coming along the bottom now. We have all the other outsides sewn. So we're going to do a few more stitches, and then we're going to stop and leave that gap so that way we can stuff it, turn it right side out. So think about an inch or two should be enough space. You always want to leave more space instead of less space, because turning something right side out when you have a very small space is very frustrating and very difficult. So I've got a pretty big gap there. I'll do one more stitch, and then we'll call it good. And I'll go back through this previous stitch and give it a knot. There we go. Okay. So just like before, we'll cut it away from the knot. And now we're just going to reach in and grab the tip of one of these horns and pull it out. You just want to work on turning it right side out. And we'll double check these seams that we made. Worried about this ear tip when I sewed it, so we're just going to give it a little stitch up top. We can tie this in a knot, and then we'll actually take our tail before we stitch it up and tuck it in. We won't be able to see it if I can get it to tuck in there. This part doesn't want to turn right side out all the way. There we go. And then we'll just give it a stitch or two up top. So now that you've searched around and fixed any possible holes, you can go ahead and stuff the stuffed animal. So you have your whatever you're stuffing it with. You can use scraps, yarn, or this actual polyfill stuffing. And you just work it in there. and you want to make sure you get it up into like legs or horns or any smaller places first. And because this is just yarn done, I don't want to overstuff. I don't want it pushing against the seams. Just keep shoving it in there until it is as stuffed as you want it. I think just a little bit more. Then we have this hole down here, so you want to roll the edges of the fleece, which should be pretty easy because it should go with the way the yarn sits, and you just pinch it together like that. And you can take your yarn and go through a stitch that's already there and knot it. Give it a little knot. And then we take our tail and we tuck it in so we don't have to worry about it anymore. And then we're just going to go through and the same on this side, up through the green, and then we'll just keep going back and forth like that until we close this gap. Oops, I lost my thread or my yarn. That back through, and we'll go back and forth. Just keep going until we pass over at least one stitch that's already been done. Seem to have a loop here, so we're just gonna knot around it, and then we'll drag it into the stuffed animal with us. So now what you want to do is you take your needle and you put it into the stuffed animal with the yarn on it and poke it out just any old place, and then pull it, and that will take all that excess yarn into the stuffed animal. I can't quite get that knot in there, but that's okay. So now we have this that's hanging out. You want to pull it a little tight and just snip it, and that will hide the tail. See, now we don't have a tail anymore. And now we are all done. I think he turned out pretty cute. It's got a couple of bigger knots on there than I would have liked, but that is a problem with this yarn. It just kind of really easily falls apart like that, and you kind of get stuck with those bigger knots because of the type of yarn it is, but that's okay. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, if you can like, share, comment, and subscribe on my work, that would be extremely helpful to me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a really great day.